Greetings to the world at large and warm welcome to the Azapo Online Political Education. My name is Puselete Bilusa, the Secretary General of Azari. I welcome you. We are on our own as you. This is the thing that we are talking about, and we are celebrating the 45 years of uprising youth that fought at the forefront for us to have a better future, which is what they did. I'm not alone. I'm with others who are here to celebrate with me, as it's the Youth Month this month. I have Snow Buyo, Melissa, and Yonga. Guys, introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Snow Buyo Baldina. I I am 21 years old and I am a third-year university student. In light of the topic of today, many thoughts come to mind, thinking of the youth 45 years ago and the vision that they had of the future, the now, and whether or not the issues and the challenges that they faced are issues that we are not facing today. Questions around looking at where they were in terms of their mentality, how they were united, how they had this vision of coming together and fighting against, a life or in a society whereby they were, rendered of, being marginalized, issues such as, that we will be talking about further, racism, education, employment, and just the life of a Black person. And I think that this topic does, call for us as young people to realize that we are on our own and we have to take charge of the future that we want. And it is something that I think also speaks to how we need to be unified to be able to achieve this. So I think that's just an overview of my thoughts on the topic of today.
Hi, my name is Yonge Sijaji, and I'm a varsity graduate and an Azayo representative in the Western Cape. Today, I will be sharing my views and opinions on how far we've come since the June 16 uprising and what are the challenges we are facing, the derails and the developments in our society, and how we can actually go forth and make a statement of, since the June 16 uprising, what has been done and not been done, and how can we move forward from that. So it's basically just saying that we are an importance in the society and we are the generation that actually grooms the health of the next generations to come. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nelisa Chayana. I am currently an honors student at Rhodes University. And today, in light of the topic that we will be discussing, I'll be sharing my views and thoughts on how far we've come as a country. I think it is quite clear that as much as the June 16th youth in 1976 paved the way for us, there's still a lot that still needs to be done, and that we as the youth are on our own and we have to come together in order to make sure that we move forward, and because the battle still continues.
Thank you, guys. So today we'll be talking about racism, education, unemployment, and mental health. Racism, which is what's gonna go first. Racism, it's not about wearing our skin proud and saying I'm Black and proud and I'm dark and lovely. It's something beyond, which we are way far from fixing the problem of racism. So I have people like Snowview and others who have their own view on racism. So let's get it on. Snowview.
Yes, just as you have stated, I do think that racism is an issue that continues to be very significant and influence the many and also drive many other issues that we face in society. But I do think that it's also important to place emphasis on what that entails and what racism means and how it looks at the marginalization and oppression of Black people through the social construct of race and how it feeds off this hierarchical system by white people to privilege white people. A system that recognizes race as well as power relations to further white supremacist interests. And how that is very important to understand that, I think there's also these debates and these discussions on, we can also as Black people be racist, which is very problematic, and I also think that it is something that is very prevalent in our society, but it doesn't only have to do with just Black and white people, but how it also manifests to how us Black people view ourselves. Issues around Black on Black violence, how that is not, a way to interpret and say that, okay, it is Black people being racist to Black people. No, instead it shows how they still, the issues are being very complex. The idea of, engaging with the notion, I guess, of human value and how that is still, you know, a problem among Black people and young Black people, and something that I don't think that we engage a lot on, because we all, you know, jump on and speak about the issues of race, you know, when there's this event that sparks on social media, or, you know, everyone is talking about it, and then we all come. But do we understand what that entails? Do we understand that, you know, racism has not changed, how it was during colonization, how it was during apartheid, how it continues to exist and threaten our being as Black people, and the idea that we have of ourselves, and how I think that it calls young people to look into what has been said, you know, by either the Black consciousness movement or that of the Pan-Africanist ideology, and how they speak on the notion of racism and how to go about it, that we need as Black people to realize our self-worth, and to look at ourselves as being human, and to, you know, look at Black life as something to be proud of, that embodies dignity and integrity, and not, you know, as being violent beings. How you see, you know, even when we look at issues on, you know, Black on Black violence, you know, looking at gender-based violence, those kind of things all speak to the notion that, you know, there's still an issue of how, as Black people, we view ourselves and other Black people in the spaces, and that these issues shouldn't be isolated, but they should be united to look at how racism is very pivotal, and how it's influenced on that specifically. And I think that we indeed still have a long way to go, but these are things that need attention. These are things that we still need to grapple with as young people, and to move away from what I've experienced, you know, having been in a specific schools that had quite a lot of racism, and obviously the white and Black racism, but it also spoke to the problematic notion, I think, of how we need to educate white people, you know, on racism as a form of solution, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think that we need to focus on being united as Black people to further conscientize ourselves about the issue of racism, and to recognize, you know, our sense of worth, and to be united in saying that, no, this is something that we're against, and not only when there are certain popular conversations on the different platforms that we're exposed to, right? But to also venture more and more into how do we educate ourselves, how do we work with our communities, because there was a time I had a conversation about the life in the location and in the township, how, you know, everyone is carrying a gun, it's easy to just kill someone, it's easy to stab someone, and how that hasn't changed, even looking at how it was problematic even 45 years ago, how it still continues to be problematic now. And those are the things that I think that the notion of racism is still pivotal and important in looking at when we are trying to analyze that, and trying to say that we are people who are young people and want to be problem solvers and are critical about the things that are happening, but we need to engage with these kind of realities. So in order to say that, okay, when we're dealing with the issue of education and employment, which is going to be further discussed, we also need to understand how that in itself also, you know, affects those issues and those challenges that we face as Black people. So I think those are my views on the issue of racism.
Okay, thank you, Snobuyo. Yonga, do you have anything to say?
Yes, I do. Well, with my input, I would say I agree with everything Snobuyo said, and just to add on, you know, it's a bit worrying when you have to teach people how to act around other races, you know, because you shouldn't be teaching a person how not to be racist. It's not something you are born with. It's something you develop in time when you're surrounded by an environment that is toxic in a way that just camouflages their thoughts, you know. And I think our generation, we grew around so much multi-racial relationships and situations, but and then we tend to discover that it is still there. It is something that is, you know, amongst us, and it's important for Black people to actually consciously just know that it's not okay. You know, I shouldn't be able to point out that a white person is being racist, or or how should I act to myself? Because yes, you are Black, you're beautiful, but why do I have to stand out? Why do I have to point out my hair? Why do I have to point out my skin color, my melanin, and say, here, I am Black? It should be something that is just out there and that is not pointed out by society, because that still isolates you as a Black person, meaning that you're still under that stigma of you are Black and you're different. There are certain things you can do and certain things you cannot do, and it's those slug comments and those actions where you look into the society that you are at your workplace, at school, with your friends, and when you enter an elite environment, there are questions around it. You're not automatically just blending in. It's okay, Black, what do you have that you're here, And so for me, it's more of what's we said. We need to be conscious ourselves of Black people. We need to learn how to learn ourselves, accept ourselves, and be able to actually, point out these things and actually attacking them. Have a mind where you can say, you're being racist. This is not right, and also try to teach ourselves to actually not try to fit into society by actually pointing out our good looks, our beautiful bodies, our color, the skin of our color, our hair, and just try live like normal people, because other races, they don't have that thing of where they have to point out who they are to be able to fit in society. But we are programmed to actually, make ourselves feel better, by pointing out the faults that we have and actually accepting them publicly, where you could just do it private and be okay with it. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Yonge. Elisa?
Firstly, I think it's very, very unfortunate that we are still having this conversation about racism. Because, for example, if you look to maybe 10 years back and you ask the youth, like, what are the challenges that we are facing? And you'd find that racism was still an issue back then, and it is still an issue today. And racism is still very rife in South Africa, despite the fall of apartheid. And we see this in schools, and we see this in the workplace, and we also see it in the industries that we are participating in. And it's very unfortunate that as a Black person, you can't exist in those spaces and just be yourself. As a Black person, you always kind of have to be an activist wherever you go. You don't have the luxury of just being who you are and not minding what's happening around you, because you have to speak up to those things, because if you don't, then who will? Because it's been happening, unfortunately, but we still need to stand up to that and actually speak to that. And also another thing is that as children, we are told that this is what happened before you guys were born, and this is what's happening right now. This is what we are experiencing as a country and as Black people, and this is how you must react to it. And whereas you'd find that with white kids, they don't have that. We're the ones that are being told from a very young age that this is what you guys are going to experience, because we've also experienced it. And also with my generation, people are having kids and people are having to tell their children that. And it's just an ongoing thing in South Africa. And it's very unfortunate that racism is very much underplayed. I think we don't take it seriously, because it causes a lot of damage, and an apology doesn't fix that. It's just not enough. And I've also realized that there's a sense of entitlement, especially with white people, that they feel they can have a racist phase. And people will tell you that, oh no, it's just I used to be racist, as if you get a pass. Like, you don't get a cookie, you don't get a pass for being racist. It's not okay, and we will not accept it. We will stand up for that. And I think that the government still has a long way to go in terms of that. And I think there are laws that are put in place for discrimination and racism, but I think it's not applied as much as it should. And as Sinovuyo and Yonge said, I think it's very important that as Black people, we come together because it's literally the only way that we can move forward.
Thank you, Nelisa. Now we're moving next to the next topic, which is education. As we grow up, we were taught that education is the key to success, and we all are graduates. I'm a civil engineer by graduate, others are doing honors and all that. So, and basic education, it's not enough, guys. Really, it's not enough. So is the ink on the paper really enough as an education that they're giving us? So I'll have Nelisa to take us through the process of the thought of education.
I think firstly, the education system fails Black people. There is no progress in the education system. And within that, you also can't overlook the inequalities that comes with that, because you have Black children that are not receiving the same amount of the same quality of education because of the schools that they went to. And this also plays a huge role in university, and it plays a huge role in the workplace, and it also plays a huge role in and for people that want to start their own businesses. And also the inequality when it comes to like the financial background, which prompted the Fees Must Fall and the Rhodes Must Fall movement, and the impact that had on education in South Africa. Because I think for the most part, those students, the 2015 students who actually were part of that movement, are often compared to the youth of 1976, because they took a stand. And I think because of what they did, it made things very easier for many of us that actually came to university after that movement. And because I know from 2018 onwards, students that are funded by NSFAS, it's actually a bursary now, and it's not alone. But however, the students that enrolled in university or in colleges in 2017, and before that, it's still a loan and you still have to pay it back. But it's it's still not enough, because you'd find that in some universities, the fees are 120 for the year, and NSFAS would pay 90,000, and there's still a balance, and a student is expected to pay that amount. And where are they going to get that amount? And then you're told that the following year you can't return, that you need to pay your debt. And it just shows that there's still a huge gap, even though those movements did put a lot of people in, but there's still a lot that needs to be done in terms of that.
Thank you, Nelisa. Yonga, do you have anything to say?
With that said, agreeing with everything Nelisa has said, when it comes to education, from the Fees Must Fall, there's been an improvement. Yes, there has been, but like she said, if NSFAS is going to only pay a certain percentage of your tuition fees, then you've got debt, even though you are not paying back the 90,000 per se that you NSFAS paid, but you still have that balance and you still have to work to pay it off, of which, remember, you come from a background, you have nothing in the first place. That's the reason why you got the bursary, is because you have nothing. So how is it expected that within your 3 years, maybe your 3 years, 4 years, you already got something to pay back, So it's a very, it had its positive aspects, but there's still something there, because at the end of the day, the people who fought, the youth that fought and for the fees must fall, the aim was to have free education totally, with no debt, with no balances, with nothing, no loopholes, nothing hanging on to the students financially, and their families. Because remember, with Black people, 90%, 95%, 98% of the students that are studying, the families are actually looking at them to provide back. Now, it's already difficult to go through your 3 years because there's accommodation involved, there's transport involved, and already there's food involved, and already that takes a strain on your education, because you go to school and you're still thinking of those things, and then you're not taking your lessons into head because you're trying to find means to make it work. You're already stressed about the debt that you're going to have at the end of the day. Also, the fact that if you come from if we come from two different backgrounds, you come from your suburb, I come from the location, automatically our learning skills are different, because it's either where I come from in the location, the education was not so much that I became a slow learner. I don't take things into head because I always had that free time. The teachers weren't in class, in high school. And whereas a child who comes from your suburb or from a multiracial school or white school, they actually know that they have to concentrate at a certain time. They know that they are dependent on that because they were taught already at school. They had the privileges. So again, when it comes to education, Black people are still not catered for, because you come from a poor background, where you have not received all these things. You didn't have a laptop or a tab or even a phone for that matter, so the information that you had was just a textbook. That's if you had a textbook at school, because there are schools that don't have enough textbooks. So you're only dependent on that teacher who teaches on the board, and you do your homework, and that is it. So we kind of had a breakthrough with education, but then also, what about, we're not catered for as Black people? And on top of that, us as Black people, we are hand-skilled people. We are people who actually creative. We do things with our hands. Those things are not realized in a very young age already, as you are now going for a course that is easier for you to do so that you can just make means end. Whereby had you been helped skillfully at a very young age, you would be able to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take IT, not because IT is there or it's cheaper or whatever reason you're taking it for, but because at school, I actually had access to computers, and I actually realized, oh my word, I really love this, But then now you come here, you're doing your course just because you find it, either you're guessing it's easier and then you find out it's not, or just because the only thing that makes sense to do. So yes, with the education system, it's just got too many loopholes for me, and it's something that really needs to be tapped on, and something that shapes your future in a whole, because it is a system that was introduced to us, and now that it's here, what can we do about it? How can we change it to fit as Black people? Thank you.
Thank you. It's no good.
Well, I do agree with the points, the very important points that have been made by Unelisa and Nyonge regarding the issue of the quality of education for Black people. And also, the point on really education and the education system as a whole does not cater to, equipping, knowledge that looks at equipping young people to be able to be self-sustainable, self-reliant, that speaks to bettering the life of a Black person. mean, look at how even in the conversation of trying to have students catch up during the coronavirus, issues on connectivity, and all these things that speak to how there's this gap between the education of Black people and that of those that are more privileged. Spaces and station that we have every single year, the number of students, will tell us that year 2018, half of that number is not there, simply hasn't made it to matric. How is that being dealt with? It becomes one of the things that we need to engage with and look at. Are young Black people being equipped or are they acquiring knowledge that speaks to a specific skill set that even if you don't make it to university, are you able to sustain yourself? Are you able to uplift your community? Are you able to bring life in the idea of living as a Black person? And I think that, yes, definitely, like they've mentioned, we're still far from achieving that. It's still a long way to go, and certain things just need to be in place, for Black people, and there's still issues within the education system, and how there was this particular vision that the education system was supposed to look like, and how it's supposed to, speak to the life of Black people, and how to change it and make it this thing where we are able to be, proud of it, as the youth of 45 years ago, had envisioned. And definitely that is not something that we can say today we have achieved, even as highlighted by the previous panelists. So yeah, those are my views.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Your
and
next
I'd like to kind of add to what she said. With the pandemic, when everything started, we were told and we were assured that no student will get left behind. But now in 2021, that's not the case. So many students are being left behind, and the universities are continuing with online education, but some students don't have access to that. And we were told that everyone would have access to that. They would get a laptop and they would have internet access, and that is not the case. So many students were left behind and were forced to deregister because there's just no other option. And I know that some universities did make plans to send laptops, for example, for students that don't have. And but what are some students going to do with those laptops when they don't even have electricity at home and they don't have internet access? So I think the government did fail students again, because a majority of a lot of students had to deregister because of that. So many people were left behind.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. So I wanted to add on your statement of us being categorized into skills and just having an academic record. Paper, it's not enough, guys. And the quality of our education, it's not a good quality of education. It's just a basic education that they're offering us, which they have to match records and skills. Because the moment you're done with studying and you have your honors degree or your diploma, then they say they want experience, which if they match theory and skills and practical at the same time, we adding up to experience that we'll be having after acquiring the qualification, because ink is not enough. We are stuck behind desk for years and years. While when we go to the field, we are unemployable because we don't have skills or experience because we read it on paper. So this has to change. They have to merge. The system is just failing us as a whole. As a whole. So now we're moving to unemployment. We have qualifications, but dololo, dololo. Qualification, this big.
Well, on unemployment, like you said, the education is there, but no employment at all. It becomes to a point where I realized you start thinking it's useless. So why do I have to get educated if I'm not going to get a job? You start doubting yourself. So with unemployment, it's been a problem for the young ones for a long time, for years and years. And I feel it's still going to prolong, because I feel like the government does not know what to do. Because with each and every implementation they have, the Tuma Minas, the Yes campaign, none of it is showing a difference, into unemployment. And as much as the statistics are there, and sometimes you see, oh, okay, 200,000, youths were employed, there's still no difference, because when you minus that 200,000, another 250,000 emerges from nowhere, and it covers that amount as well. So you wonder, where are they? Did they really get employed, or is it just some, add-on? With unemployment, it goes back to your education, the experience, where you just graduated and you are going into tourism and they want 5 years experience, of which you've got no way to get it, because remember, you do theory, you're on your books, and you're stuck there for 3 years and you're doing the same thing over and over again. Now, yes, some people, get the luck of getting internships, some get the luck of actually doing part-time work, but sometimes that part-time work does not actually calculate and come and become enough to have a 5-year experience, but that is what is expected of you. And the criteria for the job would be, we need a graduate, but then it's that experience again. Number 2, it's so difficult now. Corruption is everywhere, because it also depends on who is employing you. Because you get into, it's not as normal and anymore where you could send your CV, actually walk in with your CV and give someone that CV, and they could actually see your face and actually calculate, okay, I think we could have this one in our company. But then now we have to apply through all these, apps and websites, and you have to have an account, your Indeeds, your LinkedIn's. But then what about the people who don't have access to the internet? Yes, we are revolving into your technology, and we are growing into technology and making things easier for people, but most people do not have access. And even those who do, it's also difficult, because remember, now there are thousands of you applying for the same job, and you get that the employer only looked at the first 2 CVs that dropped in the email and probably didn't look at the 990,000, that is still waiting in the inbox. And those people are not even qualified as much as those you didn't even look at. So we've got that problem where we do not know what happens to our CVs, what happens behind that desk, behind that computer when we send our CVs, to a point where you don't even want to apply on these apps anymore, because you believe they actually do not work, and it discourages the youth, because now you just can't live in that world where you keep on doing the same thing every day. You wake up, it becomes a job to actually find a job, where every day you're going to submit a CV. What about the internet that we use? Where do we get the money to buy the data bundles? The thoughts of that, how are we supposed to get jobs if your education doesn't even work for you? On a positive side, at least there's the limelight. When it comes to unemployment, the youth have become so dependent on themselves, that they create job opportunities for themselves, they become entrepreneurs. But how long will that sustain them, as the funding is also lacking, and also if we are all going to do the same thing, then we are all doomed, because you come with a product and someone else comes with the same product, and then millions of us have the same product, whereby our skills could also be, used at these jobs that are here, all these workplaces that are here. And we need to look at how our government, looks at what are the policies put out there, because companies are outsourcing jobs out of the country. You get people from outside who come to work in the country. And now that it stops promotions as well. Okay, you've got the job, but now you're not being promoted because someone from USA is coming to work in your position in South Africa, and you are a South African, a qualified one at that. So it all goes back to, do we find importance and relevance within ourselves as the Black people of South Africa? Do we look at our young ones, or is the government, afraid that if we are put into these positions, would we take over? Are they afraid of letting go? It just gives you a lot of questions. Why isn't the youth encouraged? Why is the youth? Because we are encouraged by word of mouth and no action. It's always, we need to look after the youth, we need to train, and we need to, develop and put skills and give them skills. It's always the talk, and the promises. But the implementations are actually not there. It's still the same old people, the same old 60-year, 70-year-old people who refuse to leave and create more space. And even so, when they actually do leave, they already have someone set to take over who's still 50 years old, So it's now, we end up, getting into ourselves, sitting at home and saying, okay, I'm not going to waste my daughter anymore. I'm just going to see what I can sell, whether it's fruit and veg, whether it's clothes. And then that is good. You're being an entrepreneur. You may grow a business, you may not grow it, we don't know. But what about that desperate child who's going to say, you know what, I'm going to start robbing people now because I deserve what they have? What about them? What are we doing? What are we doing wrong? Because at the end of the day, unemployment is a big issue for the young ones, because we've got standards that we want to meet. We've got countries that we want to be like. And the first world countries, your Americans, and we try to fit in so much that we do things in order for us to actually be relevant to them, because you don't want to be looked as a country that is poor, that is devastated. And we're now the sad generation. We're called the sad generation. Why are we the sad generation? What is making us sad? There's only one thing that could make a sad generation. It's the money. It's unemployment. It's being unable to make means end for your family, because the same family is looking at you and they're the ones saying, you are going to put us up there. But now you know that you have no means as such. You know that there's nothing you can do, and there's always something you can do, but there's actually really nothing you can do if the system is closed itself. So now it's, what are we going to do? How can we break into that system as the young people? Do we have to be rascals again? Because the June 16, they had to be rascals. 2015, they had to be rascals. Now again, who are going to be the rascals? Who must take their energy? Who must sacrifice themselves? Because remember, every time these events happen, there's a sacrifice, you know. People on the for the fees must fall, people were suspended, expelled, you know, people had to leave school because they were being ill-treated for standing up for their rights, you know. June 16, people died, people, you know, stopped going to school. It's things like that. There's always a sacrifice, and it's a huge sacrifice, which creates the unemployment, because now those people didn't further school. Now they're sitting at home without, you know, education. They don't have the right criteria or experience because they had to drop out. Who wants to hire a dropout, you know? So now again, we have to sacrifice for employment. Who's going to sacrifice? That's the question. Who's going to stand up and say, okay, I'm going to fight? And when they fight, you lose something in the process to gain something. And if you look at it, you do gain, but you never gain the 100% intentions. It's always going to be less than 50% of what you intended to gain. So unemployment for us is a very big issue, because we are the health of the next generation. We are the health groomers of the next generation. They have no choice but to believe in us, but the system is refusing to look at the youth. They're refusing to actually give us, you know, the chance, because it's a relay. It's supposed to be a relay. You run, you give it over to someone else, you let go, you know. But at the end of the day, whoever wins for us all. But that is not the mentality we have. So how do we teach each other to actually, you know, blend, you know, the education system, and to blend the unemployment, because it starts with the education. If you fail there, you fail everywhere, you know. And it's all to do with the system and the control they have, and refusing to let go. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Yongi. Melissa.
I think Yonge pretty much touched on everything, literally everything. Yeah. And just to kind of add a little to what she said, I think for the longest time we were told that you know, education is the key to success, and that if you study, you're gonna get a job, and you know, things are gonna go well for you. But that's not the case now. You know, people do obtain their qualifications and they sit at home, and you know, nothing happens. And also back to what I think Yonge mentioned about skills, and I think that should actually be implemented at a very young age. I think students need to get out of the classroom more. I think it's the school system is mostly based on just you being in the classroom in theory, and then you get to university and college, and that's also more or less the same thing. And I think we need to get out more of the classroom and actually acquire skills. And there are different types of young people. And you get young people that go for it and continue to go for it, and you get other young people that really do go for it, but the system just fails them. And you also get other young people who have things handed to them. So there's also inequalities that comes with unemployment.
Lovely.
I think, in all honesty, a lot has been covered and a lot has been emphasized. And I guess my contribution would be saying that it all boils down to this is a joint effort. Everyone has to come on board and say that we are going to work with communities. We are going to shine more light on initiatives and programs that exist that speak to the fact of the matter is we need to create jobs at this point. There's a great importance and emphasis that is placed on that. Because yes, unemployment is an issue, and yeah, there are some opportunities, but the mere fact is that there is not enough for a lot of people. And also, if we are going to be entrepreneurs, we can't all be entrepreneurs in the same thing. We need to invest our time and engage with the realities that we are exposed to, look at where there is a demand in something, and again, come together with initiatives, even the private sector, if we must. But it all comes to that point of all of this we have to all do. It shouldn't be a thing of as an individual, I'm doing it so that it doesn't affect me. But as a unit, we are all doing this so that the people behind us never have to have this conversation, never have to come to this platform and say that, oh, we have an issue of unemployment, we have an issue of, you know what I mean? So it's things of that nature that I think that, all of the things that have been outlined and have been spoken about by Lisa and Nonge boil down to the fact of the matter as a solution. We need to come together. We need to either, start implementing initiatives as young people, because some of us are knowledgeable about these things, you understand? But it all comes to the issue, like I think what Melissa spoke about, is the issue of visibility. Are we all aware of it? Because there are initiatives that speak to this, there are programs, but they may not be enough, or they may not be visible to every single person. But we can't be the side generation forever. Those before us showed us that if we all come together, we all need to resist and to fight against all notions that are imposed on us Black people, that our life has to be miserable. Our life has to be a challenge. It has to consist of issues on a consistent basis. And it is not something that can be done by being comfortable. Like you've said, it comes with sacrifice, it comes with pain, but it has to be worth it, because either way, we are going to experience that pain, we are going to experience those frustrations. We can't escape that because it's so systematic. Like I've highlighted when it comes to the issue of racism, it is something that is systematic. It was not built to privilege Black people. Just the whole system and how it operates. It was never, intended to make our lives wonderful. It was intended to make our lives miserable. And just having certain individuals occupy certain spaces does not speak to the fact of the matter is we have a long way to go. So I think I'll just end there when it comes to that.
Okay, thank you. I think a lot has been said on unemployment. We cannot say the system is failing us now. It's just an error, because we have everything. We cannot say it keeps on failing us. The error, because it starts from education coming down. We have the right qualifications, but yet they decide to go to Cuba and call engineers while now we are here. Is that even possible? Like Cuba come engineers and Tennessee Sla. Guys, it's just an error. The system is an error as a whole. Because they said we should go to school. Education is the key to success. Yes, we have the key. So now, because we are aiming for the door, they want 35 years of experience. What are they saying, Dakega? Like I've just acquired my qualification, then they come, skills, experience, 35 years of experience. Like they just want us to start behind desk, because they are not even making. Okay, another thing is, see, the government should stop providing about companies or their friends with the program, skill program that they're gonna implement skills and give graduate experience, because they are not doing that. Like they're not doing that. They're just chowing the money. They're just eating the money, because we're not getting any experience, because they get the qualification, go look for a job, then gain 35 years of experience. Where do we get that? Because they should have gave us the experience the moment we enrolled at school. That's where we say day one experience, so that when we get out, we are qualified, we are employable. But then our system error. Okay, now we're moving to mental health. We are a third generation. We are a fucked up generation. We are a third generation, guys. We have qualification. We have like degrees and everything. Now we get to look for a job. We are unemployable. That's why we end up drinking beer just to ease everything. We just get wasted. Go like our problems will be solved when the time is right. Because we're trying so hard. Like we study, look for peace jobs, and then that's why at some point I don't blame the sex workers, because at some point it's difficult for them because there are no jobs. Then they end up doing such things for them to survive. Then we like, no, please take it.
I think that the issue of mental illness is one that looks even beyond just affecting young people, but Black people as a whole. I think the issue of mental illness has really captured the Black community, and it speaks volumes to you know the triggers that have resulted to that, the issues that we're facing, that how the role that it plays to the psychological and mental well-being of Black people. It also looks at what is being done to address that, what is being done to serve as a solution. Is it a thing of education? Do we still need, because some will argue, well, we talk on social media about these issues, so surely, but is that something that has spread all the way to those that are in the township and are experiencing this? Are they knowledgeable about the situation? Is it something that is normalized? Is it a conversation that we are all constantly engaging with and saying that, okay, are we aware that the magnitude of how serious the issue of mental illness is, and that it's not a matter of just looking at young people as, oh, they're just the sad generation or what, but what triggers that? The issues that we have spoken about play a role. I mean, it's not uncommon to hear of how students commit suicide, or how in the township there's an elderly person who's got mental illness and there's no one to take care of them, or the person who's taking care of them is not knowledgeable about the situation. Do you understand? But just the seriousness of it is it something that I don't necessarily think is being grappled with and being acknowledged, that it's not enough to say that, well, I mean, there's just conversation amongst young people, but it's not only about young people, it's about the Black community as a whole, and how there's a buildup of issues that contribute, to affecting, how Black people are psychologically, that it's so serious, and yeah, I think it boils down to the fact of the matter is that there's still an issue of visibility, there's still an issue of conversation and education, and just awareness and normalizing that it exists, it happens, and we need to grapple more and more and more. Otherwise, we are going to just be breeding people who are living to see death, who are not living with hope and an idea that we can live a well fulfilling life that is positive, ways, even if you're dealing with mental issues, that it's not looked at as a threat to the livelihood of Black people, but something that we are knowledgeable, something that we are able to look at, that needs to be managed. But of course, you can't do that if you are not in this thing that is serious and requires us to also look at it with that kind of lens and perspective, even when dealing with it. So yeah, I think that's where I stand.
I think as South African youth, we are in a depression crisis, and it's not getting better at all. It just keeps getting worse. And to a point where I currently stay in res, and we have a system where we constantly need to check on each other that people are still okay, and that people are still in their rooms, and that people haven't committed suicide. And as Novoya said, everything all these challenges are contributing to that. And even the pandemic sort of added to that, because of the whole uncertainty that came with it. And I think mental health is very much downplayed, especially in our Black community. And I think sometimes it comes across as if you being lazy if you were to express it, like, this is what's going on and this is why my mental health is this way. It comes across as disrespect, or you lazy, and why are you sleeping all the time, and why aren't you doing this and why aren't you doing that? But there's a lot that actually happens behind the scenes that contributes to that. And I think it needs to be addressed, and our people need
So on my view on mental health, I live right in the center of a sad generation, as we say, hashtag sad generation. It's pretty sad what I see every day, because I live in the student environment. So I've got my UWC, my UCT, the North Links right next to me. And every weekend I can say that's when they take out their frustrations and stretches. For me, it's quite, frustrating, because if they're not doing that over the weekends and then they're sleeping most of the time, especially now they've got this gap because of COVID, where they are doing online learning. So all you see they do is they're lacking, and they actually just, they sleep all day, and you wonder, why is this child sleeping? You've got work to do, schoolwork to do, and you need to go look for a job. But and then at the end of the day, it's the same thing. They're stressed about their education itself, they're stressed about the unemployment. And I feel like no one is actually taking any step to that. No one is paying attention, because the youth, they're heavily drinking. The things I see out here are very scary, and it's not something a normal person should be doing, but and then no one is paying attention. So that it's a cry for help, it's a cry for help me find a way, what is happening in society. So for me, it's very, very, very delicate issue. It's a very complex issue, because it also dials down to an individual as a person, because you cannot deal with it. You cannot deal with a mental issue as a whole. It needs to be directed to that person who is feeling, the pressure, who is mentally breaking down. And for me, it's again, how do we come together? Because it needs people to come together. It needs people to create, the hazards and the alarms of how do you know the situation has actually hit that spot, because now remember, it goes on, it goes on, it goes on. There is a breaking point, and that breaking point is what actually destroys the person themselves, at the end of the day. So we are going through these things as young people. We experience, the trouble, but now what is the way forward for it? How do we implement a structure where we can actually accommodate everybody, and also be able to say, we are all here for each other. If you need to look somewhere, you can look at me. You don't know me, but you can look at me. But I don't think we have taught ourselves to support one another, as Black people. So it starts there. How do we create a support system? How do we create, a position where we can say, this is how we act around each other. So if you see someone who's actually going through it, you step in, So it really, again, we need to come together as young people, as Black people, and actually make that statement of being available, If we can do that, then it's no doubt, it's no trouble. Obviously, we'll be able to help whoever's going through that. And hashtag sad generation, I'm not sad, I'm happy.
Now I'm sad. Okay, I think now it's time where they can throw in questions and comment, but there is already a question on unemployment in innovation part. The question goes like, what do you think its role will be in relation to unemployment? Anyone taking it? Innovation. Okay, it's no good.
I think it's a very important, it plays a significant role. Like I said, this state that we are in that looks at unemployment requires us to be very creative, to be people who are able to identify a demand in society, to be able to identify, what's happening, and just be in touch with what's happening on the ground and how we can, find ways to be innovative people, and how we need to work with those that encourage that. We have to have more programs, I guess, or initiatives other than those that exist. Discussed earlier on, regarding how that needs to be more and more, because I think that the society that we've become looks at, oh, we understand that education doesn't guarantee you this, but at the same time, we all strive for going to university, for example. Now I have all people going to university, but no one is looking at the mere fact that not everyone can go. So something needs to be done even before that even before you get to matric, you're able to have certain skill sets. I think the type of education needs to look at what supposedly it encouraged, and that is critical thinking, and that is problem solving. We need to be those people. We tend to throw it here and there, but are we embodying that? Are we speaking to that, and are we understanding that we need to be innovative? We need to be people that are always up to the challenge of saying that, well, this is what I've identified in my community. This is something that we don't have. How about we all look at doing this, or along those lines, our thinking and our mentality should be shifting towards that kind of approach now. And again, just to answer, it is a significant part of solving the issue or the challenge that we're facing, that being unemployment.
Okay, thank you. Sboi has raised a hand. Sboi?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, colleagues. Yes, mine is just a comment. Listening to the engagement, and there is no doubt the education system of South Africa needs to be re-engineered. In other words, you talk about skills, you talk about, in other words, after finish your 3-year diploma/stroke degree, so gaining experience, what you're learning. So the question is,
Mr. Sboi?
learning from other African countries who were also as a center. How did they change the system in their countries so that when you get out of the system, at least there is something you can do with your hands? In other words, you can also maybe be self-employed. I'm just looking at the Zimbabwe system. I mean, just around our neighbors, because you cannot have your degree without a skill.
Mm.
That's the bottom line. When electricity, bricklaying, carpentry, etc., so that it is coupled up with the degree, and then you can go out of the system. Yeah, because now I think we're talking to ourselves. Do we have a listening government?
No.
Do we have the government people? So this is a problem. In other words, all these things post-1994, we've been talking, preaching, change the education system from primary level, so that when you get up to the tertiary, the education system is ordered. In other words, what is the country, what kind of jobs the country is looking for? In other words, you cannot just produce all BA degrees every year. Does the economy can absorb that? Does the country economy wants that? Maybe the question is no. So in other words, like I said, I advocate, let's talk to our government to re-engineer the education system, and then everything will be okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There is a note from Mami says there is a notion that the youth of today have what is called entitlement mentality coupled with instant gratification, e.g. wanting to have a car, beautiful house, dress up, go to high class function, like have it all at once. What are your thoughts on this? Anyone?
Can I say something on that? Yes, of course, the youth, they want the cars, they want everything. We all want, we want it instantly. But then I think we are also not oblivious to reality at the end of the day, because we do know that in order to get all this, we have to work for it, but it's just the struggle of, there are certain, gates that are closed for us to actually, work through to actually get to those things, like we had the discussion earlier of the education and the unemployment, so hence this, it's jumping into conclusions. I'm not really defending the youth that much, but all I'm saying is when it comes to the entitlement mentality, I wouldn't say we all have that. Maybe those who are actually privileged, when they growing up, they have that mentality where, okay, I come from a privileged background, so I should have this, I should have that, but I do think that we are not oblivious to the fact that we do know we have to work for it, and we do know, but again, it's the delays of what's going on in our schools, the registrations. Because remember, if you register, there's this NAFSIS who takes time to do things, it takes its own time. Or NAFSIS would, delay paying for your accommodation. Now remember, you come all the way from Matitiele, you're coming to study up at UWC. And it takes, time for you to get your accommodation because NAFSIS has not paid yet. You have to wait for that. So it creates a sort of adrenaline where you're so nervous, where you're just rushing to get there, and of course, we ambitious like that. We want things to be done very quickly because we know you have to study, you have to work, find a job or create a job for yourselves if possible. But then again, there are systems in place that put you behind as a youngster, and for the system, it's quick and very easy to say, you're reckless, we're reckless, and that we want things to be done just like that, whereby that's not the expectation. The expectation is, I'm supposed to study for 3 years. I do know that. I am studying for 3 years. But then, didn't you guys say we are creating jobs for the youth? Now here I am, I'm a graduate, and you want 5 years experience from me. Where am I supposed to get it? If the education system itself does not create a practical for me to have actually that 5 years experience, where I have to find myself an internship, I have to find myself a part-time job, that is no problem. But then now I'm done with what I'm supposed to do, and maybe I'm intending to actually do more. But then are you meeting me halfway as a system, of which those are the promises and things that are put out there. Again, it's all talk and no show. So obviously those statements of entitlement mentality and instant gratification, would be put there just so that there can be this stigma for the young people, in order for them to actually, feel less, I don't know what to say, in order to feel that, okay, maybe I'm asking for too much, so let me just, draw back a little. That ambition needs to be there. For me to do that job, it needs to be there. I need to want that car, everybody wants it. So yeah, that's all I have to say. I hope I answered.
Okay, thank you, Younger. Kulfela Mashabela.
Oh, thank you, guys. I'm really proud of you. I just love the way you have thought about your situation as young people. But there is also a question that I'd like to ask. How do you relate mental health to the GBV that is happening in the Black community? You also find that young people are also involved in that GBV. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kuro. Anyone taking it? Wadi, Amy? Nobody. Oh, need. Melissa, are you coming in?
Just to answer the question, I think it does go hand in hand. It also is a factor in terms of mental health, because especially as girls, we don't feel safe. We cannot go anywhere without letting people know, Witty, this is where I'm going, and I'll tell you when I arrive. So I think there's always kind of that's always like on your head. I think also with people that are in abusive relationship, for example, that also adds on to a person's mental health. And for example, it's not always easy for people to leave these relationships for whatever reason that they might have. But but I think to just add on to this, it does go hand in hand with the gender-based violence and mental health. It does affect us in some way.
Thank you, Nellis. Noble.
I think Nelly has somewhat, outlined what my approach would be, is that obviously something of that nature that looks at the violence on us like people speaks volumes to our psychological well-being. It affects it in ways that are very, very significant. There's no way that you can be in such a situation and be someone who is okay psychologically and as if nothing has happened. It does affect you. The mere fact that I know someone at some point, I don't know who it was specifically, spoke about how, even as a female just walking and you see a man walking behind you, you will just, go into that notion of, oh, he could possibly want to harm me, or, you're constantly in this state of fear. And again, it speaks to the images that we have of each other as Black people, that, you because in light of the issue of gender-based violence, and that it's centered around violence being, imposed on another Black individual, constantly we're going to live in this state of unrest and where there's no peace in your mind, and you're facing distraught and stress and so forth, and you just seen us as an individual who embodies violence. And again, it's something that needs to be addressed and looked deeply into, and we need to rid our society as Black people of that. And it's not something that is simple, because it's not easy to want to venture into having conversations with people who beat you up and not just being played as a woman or someone who relates differently in terms of their identity and sexual orientation and so forth, because also those conversations, it does play a significant role in the well-being and the issue that we're facing, which is of mental illness.
Thanks, Snovuyo. And now it's almost that time of ending the program, so throw in some comments. Yonga?
So I just want to say that, well, this has been a wonderful discussion for me at first, but then also I'd like to say, I think we at a point where we have all the recognitions of what is happening around us and that we are aware of the situations and the developments that are happening. I would like to just say that the youth really needs to come together and, bring the communities as a whole together, ourselves, and bring the communities together. That way the whole country, just binds. And we need to look at these issues because they're all like a river flowing, they connect somehow, into the sea. So I feel like we need to seriously critically look at the education system, in terms of skills development, and especially for the underprivileged people, the poor people, the Black people, and see how they can be skilled enough to be able to actually cater for themselves, because at this point, there is no other way other than creating jobs for yourself and, applying some entrepreneurship skills in order to, get through to those jobs and outsourcing yourself. So for me, I just want to say thank you very much for inviting me to be here, and also hopefully we can have more discussions in terms of how we can actually implement change in going forward.
Thank you. Snowy?
I think I also share some of the sentiments that Uyonge has highlighted. I guess my last remarks would be, we young people, we are on our own. The issues that we have discussed today are not new issues, and they also are not issues that can just resolve themselves. It requires an effort from everyone. All of us, we need to come together. We need to decide first and foremost what kind of a future that we would like for ourselves. Are we individuals or young people who are Black who are saying that we want to have a future where certain individuals don't have to face certain realities, issues, or challenges? Or are we saying that we are the type of society that wants to rid, society of all these issues, that they don't face anyone and that they're not serving as a challenge to everyone? And I think then we will be able to look at some of the things that have been said regarding this. I mean, like most of the things that we have been able to identify and our approach to it are things that have been highlighted in the Black consciousness movement and that of Pan-Africanism. Nothing that we were saying when it comes to issues of unity and so forth are new. So we need to delve more and more into that. We need to focus our times and efforts and engage with the notions that we need to work towards restoring dignity and the idea of being young Black people, and how our existence and our essence, like has been highlighted and spoken, and exhausted in this conversation, has to be something that we're able to say that those who follow behind us are going to be very proud and say that we have played our part. They will also continue, and there is not this gap of those that were eager, hopeful, had a vision of the future, and those that are known as the third generation. You know what I mean? That we don't have that gap, that it continues for years and years to come. So young people, we are on our own, and our futures are in our hands, and we need to fight against being despondent, being hopeless, being frustrated, resist against being told that we are nothing, that we are inferior, and that we are violent beings, and that being Africans and being Black is something that we cannot take pride in. It's something that we need to constantly seek validation for. So yes, thank you so much for this platform and for being invited.
Thank you, Snowball. Nelis, chosen.
Yeah, just to kind of add, I really do think we are on our own as young people, but it's very fortunate that we are actually aware of what's happening in our country and the challenges that we are facing, so that we can actually move forward. And I also agree with the others about what they said about coming together to actually deal with these issues, and so that the next generation don't have to go through that. And I know the generation before that was their goal, that we wouldn't have to have these discussions, that we wouldn't have to talk about these things that they also spoke about, but so that we can really unite and continue together to fight these challenges.
Thank you, Melissa. I want to take this moment and thank everybody who tuned in and the panelists. And what I want to say is, indeed, we are on our own, and we'll forever remember the heroes who fought at the forefront for this day to be made. And then we also have to stand as youth. They're gonna make comments about us saying the future is in our hands. What are we doing with it? We should start standing firm and act as youth. It's us who are suffering after all. We cannot just sit and relax and let the government fail us as much as we are failing ourselves by doing nothing. Something has to be done. Keep warm, stay safe, avoid meetup and gathering, unnecessary gathering. Cholera kills. From Cape to Cairo, everywhere. Thank you.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Listen, the struggle was not red. I experienced it, being deprived, being oppressed, even confused. It's enough now, we're taking the power back. We're stronger than before, we're prouder, too strong. The worst is over. From Cape to Cairo, Morocco to Madagascar. From Cape